So today's theme, of course, is the god Kronos, which is the god of time, which is the god of setting boundaries, which is the god of letting go of also the stuff that gets in our way. It's about getting clear as to what's important for us and what we need to put our focus on. So it's quite an extensive one. We'll do a little bit of work around a little ritual that you can create for yourself as well to set boundaries. And we'll talk a little bit about time, and we'll talk a little bit about the very opposite of that, which is surrendering and letting go and going into a space of allowing the divine in without this limitation of our physical body. Of course, you know, the very fact that we incarnate into a physical body in a third dimensional realm is already a big lesson about boundaries and about restrictions. And of course, within that third dimensional reality, we are bound by time, which is a different type of limit that is imposed. So this reality that we incarnate into is very much about limitation. It's about learning limitation. It's about learning the opposite of limitation, which is liberation. And it could be said that, you know, when we're born into this reality, we really are dying to spirit, and we are therefore in the process of constant growth and rebirth to prepare ourselves for our death, which is our ultimate liberation. But of course, that liberation comes with strong investment in the physical body, strong investment in time, just, you know, given that we need to survive in different ways than we would when we are in our soul aspect. And of course, our soul aspect is kind of who we really are in the ageless sense, in the sense of our bigger identity. And then we have this little short sojourn in this lifetime with this body, with these restrictions. But, you know, the very fact that we kind of put so much energy into it, and the very fact that we get so invested in it, means that it has to be, you know, it has to have a purpose. It's, you know, it might just be the sort of blink of an eye in the bigger timeless picture of things, but it's very convincing, and it needs to be very convincing so that we can really learn the lesson, and that we can really we can kind of take something back with us into that endless state that lies beyond. But this is all, of course, big words, big conjecture. You know, it's very hard to really know what comes after life. You know, some people have had some glimpses and some ideas, and that's what we'll sort of also talk about a little bit and touch on a little bit in this session. But we'll just start off with 20 breaths. We'll do a brief opening, a brief sort of relaxing, and then we'll do a bigger sort of process and meditation around the theme today of Kronos and time and limitation. We'll do a bigger theme around that at the end of the session. And the other thing that I will ask you to do is before we do that meditation, I will ask you to either get a candle or some incense or something that you can smudge yourself with, because we'll do a little bit of work just with smudging and creating a little bit of a spiritual ritual space when we go into that meditation at the end of the session. But for now, let's just enjoy where we are in this time and space together. So we'll do 20 breaths, which is 4 short breaths, 1 long breath times 4. And then we'll do a brief visualization after, and then we'll discuss the theme a little bit more. So let's all close our eyes, and long deep breath through the nose. And now 4 short breaths. And then 5 more. So, keeping your eyes closed. And given that our theme today is about our boundaries and our limitations, let's start off with the body. Just feel how body bound you are, but this doesn't need to be a negative thing. Just feel your weight in your body, feel the tug of gravity. Feel the surface that you're sitting on and how that supports you. And just let that feel comfortable. Let that feel supportive, safe. Because above all else, we want you to feel safe during this session. And now get a sense of your thoughts, worries, doubts, fears, the things keeping you out of this moment, things you should have done yesterday or things you have to do later on. Just let them dissolve, let them go, so that you can be here and now, present. Feel your emotions now, the prominent emotions of the last few days, and perhaps just give them some space now. Feel them, see what they want to say to you, and then let go. Just let go of those emotions so that you can be in peace. And in many ways, our body, our emotions, our thoughts define us while we're here in this reality. The physical space around us defines us. But now, allow yourself to go beyond, to transcend. Perhaps you just get a sense of that expansive you that is beyond your body, beyond your name, beyond what you do in the world, beyond your challenges, beyond your joys. There's a you that's beyond that. There's a you that has a deeper understanding, a deeper connection. There's a you that is your essence. And perhaps you really feel that essence when you're feeling joyful, or when you're in nature, or when you're following your passion, when you feel free and enthusiastic. Make space for that boundless you, that essential you that goes and ties you to your soul experience. And that's not a personality thing, that's a force and a power that runs through your greater consciousness, your greater awareness, your greater self, a self that exists between lifetimes, in parallel lifetimes. It's the essence of who you really are, what your soul really is. So as you connect to this, make a commitment to yourself to create more space for the expression of this you, of this aspect and being. Be willing to listen to this you more, to learn from it, to be guided. And of course, this higher aspect of you is not separate from the divine, not separate from the creation, but it's kind of part of your identity beyond the limits of your earthbound identity. So it's an aspect of you you can expand into, grow into, and cultivate a relationship with. So just resonating with that higher aspect of you. Relaxing into it. And now just take another long deep breath, and in a moment when you return, by opening your eyes, you'll be back here, aware of that higher self, that higher you, but also just aware of your body in the room that you're in. So open your eyes now and be back. Good. So before we go into our themed talk, I'm going to draw a card that relates to today and to this week. And the card that comes up here is Plutus, which is the god of abundance, the god of outer riches, the riches of the world out there, and of course the inner riches. And the interesting lesson always of Plutus and abundance in general is that when we kind of are expanded and expansive within, when we're not getting stuck in limitation or poverty consciousness or the reasons why certain things can't happen or can't be done, when we're not stuck in those thoughts and beliefs, things can flow, and we can kind of get out of our own way and allow the flow to carry us forward. But, when we kind of, and this relates to abundance consciousness a lot, it's when we look outwardly, for proof of, am I abundant or not? Do I have enough or not? Or is the world going to be able to provide for me? When we kind of put that focus outside, it kind of starts to break the flow, because then we get out of that state, that natural state of abundance, of having enough. And I think in modern society, we've kind of defined abundance as having, let's say the bank account or the cash, so that we can buy all the things that we think we need. But true abundance, of course, is about having resources. It's about having the resources to be able to make our lives comfortable, fulfilling, and happy. So that's not only about the cash in the bank, it's about the relationships. It's about just having what we need, getting what we need from the earth and from the people around us, in a circle and in a flow of energy. So when we define abundance as, as figures in a bank account, we kind of go into the Kronos expression, which is kind of counting and, trying to make things rational and trying to understand. Whereas when we're in the true flow of abundance, which is knowing that state of inner riches, of seeing ourselves as being worthy regardless of what we have outside of ourselves, of really cultivating that relationship with ourselves, with the divine, where we kind of overflow with joy and overflow with our own sense of our inner riches, then that becomes reflected and expressed in the world outside. And we can have a lot in life and feel that we don't have enough, or we can have very little in life and we can really feel that we have everything that we need. And of course, that latter situation is abundance consciousness. It's about feeling there's enough, being grateful for what we do have, and therefore that allows a flow and that allows openness. So to start with today, we'll kind of speak about the opposite of that, which is our friend Kronos, who is this god here behind me. Kronos is the father of all the Olympian gods. So he is the cosmological god, or a cosmic god of that abstract energy of time. And sort of in the bigger picture of classical mythology, and whether it's Greek or whether it's other systems, they often say very much the same thing. Just in a nutshell, in the classical Greek symbolic representation of how the universe was created is, first there was chaos or potential, and then night was born, and that is, out of the void comes the darkness. Then out of the darkness was born the light, and then out of the light was born the earth, or the very first matter. And then from that earth, Gaia, in the case of the Greeks, was born the pit of the underworld below and the dome of heaven above, and that created like an egg. And that egg was, Gaia was in the middle of that egg, a disc in the middle of the egg. And what held that egg together was unconditional love, or phanes, or eros. And then what happened was, out of that state of kind of divine beingness came the snake of time, and that's Kronos. Kronos is represented as the snake that twisted itself around the egg, broke that state of beingness, and caused time and lack and necessity, and therefore incarnation, mortality, to exist. And I would say, for us to experience ourselves as a soul on a different level, we need to experience incarnation, time, and lack, so that we kind of learn different lessons. The lessons opposite to the soul experience, which is timelessness, which is vastness, which is kind of having everything that we need. So this figure, Kronos, is in Greek mythology is married to Rhea, who's the goddess of the environment, the goddess of nature, kind of an equivalent of Gaia. And as soon as Rhea gives birth to a new child, which is the Olympian gods, the gods like Poseidon and Hades and Hestia, as soon as she gives birth to these gods, he consumes them, he eats them. And because he is scared that he is going to be displaced and replaced by his offspring, because in mythology he actually usurped his own father, Kronos, the sky god, to become king. So, his sense of lack caused him to want to grab power. And then as soon as he grabbed onto that power, he felt he had to do everything possible to not lose that power. And again, it's different facets of lack and different facets of control that he represents. So his offspring, the Olympian gods, the famous gods that we know, like Zeus, for example, they represent personality states, whereas his generation, the Titan gods, represented more of a cosmic order. It's very much about the planets and the cycles of the sun and the moon and the stars, and kind of very astrological, astronomical phenomena. And then out of that generation is born the Olympian gods, who are the gods of personality. So in the Greek myths that I'm sure most of there's a lot of messing around and a lot of mistakes that are made, and a lot of fun that is had, and a lot of betrayal that is had, and that kind of reflects the human state. It's kind of a poetic reflection on what human nature is, as expressed through these gods and goddesses. So that, of course, is what makes us as humans, certainly as modern humans, possible. And, you know, the ancient Greeks were actually very modern in a sense, in that, you know, they were democratic. They, as you know, especially the philosophers, spoke about the need to have discussion with others, to talk to people who have opposite opinions to yourself. And, you know, nowadays in the world, having an opposite opinion, to the powers that be or to others, has become very contentious and offensive and all of those things. And that's kind of slipping back into tyranny, you know, which was the kinds of civilizations that the very top-down Egyptian civilization had, and the Babylonians. It was very much about, this is how things are, nothing changes, you know, this is how the universe looks. This is how the world, therefore, and its political systems look. And, you know, the Greeks were kind of the first to say, well, no, we want some discussion. We want to look at other possibilities. They were never perfect in the playing out of that, but there was always the attempt. And, you know, that of course is that lesson of the Olympian gods and goddesses. But Kronos then, as time, is something that's very inflexible. You know, the flow of time just happens. There's kind of nothing we can do about it. When we are very stuck in our physical self, when we are very stuck in physical reality, of course, when it comes to having a spiritual perspective, that changes. And interestingly, the god of the opposite in terms of time in Greek mythology is Kairos, who is the god of opportunity, destiny, right time, right place, situations happening. So, you know, for example, a very Kronos style approach to wanting to make change happen in one's life, for example, or transformation, would be step by step, minute by minute. You've got to kind of put in the work, and it's got to all sort of flow in a very logical, time-based way. Chronology, you know, the word chronology comes from Kronos. Chronic comes from Kronos. Whereas Kairos is also a god of time, but that's about miracles happening and the wheel turning really fast and changing situations really fast, so that we can get to new places according to divine timing as opposed to chronological timing. So there's a whole I guess lecture in that in itself, because, you know, that's where we start to reflect on what is destiny, and, you know, what is free will, what is, you know, what are the circumstances that happen outside of ourselves. And you know, the lesson of Kronos is also very much about the lesson of the choices that we make. For example, when we are limited by circumstances outside of ourselves, it becomes important to make choices even within those limitations, and to feel empowered within those very difficult choices that we somehow need to make. And, you know, that act of Kronos devouring his children is very symbolic of the way in which he wants to control everything. But then his wife eventually feeds him a rock, and she hides away Zeus, who he would have eaten. And he is then given a purgative. He vomits up all of those other children, and they then become the gods, the modern gods, and they usurp him, and they tie him up and imprison him. And then what happens kind of in the bigger story of classical mythology is that those gods and goddesses give birth to the mysteries. And the mystery schools of the ancient times were about liberating ourselves from our roles as mortals, from our roles as limited, stuck beings. And, you know, in I think basically all ancient cultures, you know, except, you know, Hinduism, Eastern cultures, that principle of you know, you are mortal, you are going to die, and when you die, there's not even really a heaven. You know, that concept of heaven came later. But the mysteries were the way to attain immortality as a mortal being. And the absolute beauty of that, and you know, those mystery rebirthing processes are processes that we still work with, certainly that I work with in the various things that I do. That process of dying to your own mortality, and that mortality being not literal, not dying to your physical body, but dying to the belief patterns and the ways of doing things, the habits, the old limitations, dying to those and being reborn constantly, are part of the process of transcending time on a symbolic level, because we are no longer bound by the old rules that we held onto when we were in a less conscious state. And in that constant process of rebirth, we become less and less earthbound, or bound by what we delude ourselves into thinking is important, and we then start to transcend and connect more on a higher or divine level. So Kronos kind of wants to keep us, in that very act of eating, devouring his children. Kronos and chronology kind of wants to keep us in our place, within a set environment, within a set consciousness, within a sort of set time loop. And many people, probably most people, live within that. And it's kind of, that allotted time, that allotted destiny that seems to be predetermined, that, again, Kronos represents. But, when it comes to destiny, I really do believe that we do have kind of almost like a vague road of destiny, but it's our free will to choose our destiny. And very often choosing our destiny means choosing what we love and making more space in our lives for what we love or for what our passion is. So when we choose our destiny, I think our destiny is always given to us as a predisposition to something. If we don't choose our destiny, we will choose doing what Kronos tells us, which is to, toe the line, do things within its allotted time, within an allotted structure, and to, prioritize kind of that external thing that life is showing us or bringing us. When we follow our passion, we go beyond the allotted, what's outside. We then follow the love, which, going back to that cosmic egg, is the energy of phanes or eros, which is the love that attracts and it creates fullness and wholeness, as opposed to the brokenness that time creates. So that said, it's very often when we are very bound in our earthly lives, in our day-to-day lives, in our time-bound ways, we do kind of become broken, because there's either not enough time, or there's not enough of something else, and then we become trapped in that state of not enoughness. So transcending, going into following our passion, following our love, we then choose our destiny, which is a kind of a soul predisposition. And when we do that, we kind of enter the realm and the world of Kairos, which is where miracles happen, where flow speeds up, where we are given right time, right place circumstances to help carry us forward. And of course, time chronology seems to be very logical, whereas Kairos is kind of miraculous, and it kind of happens out of the blue. And when we align ourselves with the belief in the possibility of miracles, that of course becomes the sort of timeline or the path that we follow, as opposed to the one that seems to be set out and destined by something that is outside of ourselves. So one of the other lessons of that story of Kronos devouring his own children is also the way in which we let go in our lives, the way in which we hold on to certain things, and the way in which we let go. And just from the very beginning, that story is about power. It's about the desire for power in the beginning, and then you know, the fear of losing power, and therefore, you know, sort of killing one's offspring, killing one's projects. You know, if we apply this to our own lives, this isn't about, you know, other people or gods or goddesses. It's about our own projects that we allow to be born into the world and that we allow to find their own place. The same goes for children. You know, literally one's offspring, if you have children, a certain point comes where you have to let the child go and you have to let them become empowered in their own lives. So Kronos is that crippling parent, crippling in many different ways. It could be crippling to destroy, or, you know, crippling because they hold on too tight and make things too comfortable for, you know, for the offspring or for the project. The project can't fly because it's been bound by the stomach, almost like in a sort of a, you know, Kronos devouring those children is almost like, in a way, keeping them in his womb, keeping them there where he can hold onto them and control them. And this again goes back to that dichotomy between Kairos and Kronos. When we let our projects flow and open, when we let input from the outside world, not the control of our little filtered minds, but when we let, you know, life's process carry the flow forward in our projects and in our, you know, offspring in the broader sense, they can find their own way and their own expression and their own wings. And the same goes literally for time, also with our own projects. You know, sometimes we believe that, you know, in order to make a project work, you know, either we don't have time to make it happen, or there needs to be lots of time or a set way of doing the project so that it can sort of flourish. But of course, Kairos teaches that there can be the sort of miraculous opportunities, the support that comes out of the blue that takes us forward and makes it possible for us to grow. So within that, within that mythological story, there are also some other lessons around Kronos, which of course is about defining space. It's about defining our own boundaries with ourselves, first of all, and with others as well. And Kronos represents also who we are, or how we are as a container. And it could be said, for example, and my understanding of things, and I think I've mentioned this before, is when we're born, our soul is, let's say, the wholeness of the circle. That is the potential of who we are as a soul. But let's say that this is the point at which we're born. When we are born into a time-bound reality, we have to go around this edge of the chronology in order to get the bigger picture. And, you know, if this is the point that we're born, but also the point that we die, in order to know the circle of this beingness of who we are, we need to kind of do that full circle. But when we connect to the beyond, to the direct source of the soul, the center, we see ourselves as this kind of circle, as this bigger picture. And that is where the lesson of kind of going inwards, not looking at the outside world and what the outside world or the outside line is showing us. It's going back to the center. But first we need to have an awareness of what that soul, of what that circle is. And that's where boundaries come in. And, you know, I think it's kind of a universal law or rule that each one of us as a soul has the right to have healthy boundaries, to have a healthy space that is protected, that no one else or no other entity or other being has the right to enter that space without our permission. So this boundary on a physical level might start off as the aura and the membrane of the aura that kind of protects and contains this body of light that we're in. So that's kind of step one. But then step two is kind of time, you know, the time that we give to certain things, to certain activities, to certain people, also defines what we are cultivating in our lives. And that's kind of where choices come in. It's like, do I want to spend a lot of time with a person who brings me down? Or do I want to spend more time with someone who uplifts me? You know, do I want to spend time vegging out and watching TV, or do I want to spend time doing another activity that's more uplifting, that I learn something, that I contribute something, or that I grow, or that I heal myself? And you know, very often we make choices to stay in an uncomfortable comfort zone, not cultivating that kind of higher potential within ourselves, but kind of making space for things that really aren't important. And sometimes those choices are determined by our conditioning, you know, how we may have been conditioned by parents or circumstances as to, you know, how we spend our time, or, you know, what are the appropriate ways of showing love and affection and so forth. So one of those boundaries, especially as we start to feel carried by some sort of, you know, divine inspiration, one of those boundaries becomes questioning. Okay, so this is what I used to do, this is how I used to think, but I'm limited by my time in this lifetime, and this thing is more important than this relatively less conscious state. So now I've got to make the decisions and set the boundaries in my life to prioritize this side. And of course, you know, we are who we are in our essence, in our being, but we are also who we are in terms of our actions and what we do in the world. You know, our world out there and how we conduct ourselves in the world is part of our expression of our inner essence. So it becomes then a question of what we cultivate, what we put our energy into over a period of time, that defines who we are. And on the one hand, one can absolutely, you know, go with the flow and keep going with the flow. But I think always within that, there's always a sense of steering and saying, okay, the flow is definitely going in this direction, but within that flow, I want to steer and I want to go a little bit more to the right. So that there's a sense of ourselves guiding ourselves, soul guiding ourselves, of course, but also then our actions cultivating what we cause to grow and what we allow to grow, or what we prioritize. So those boundaries within ourselves become very important, and the only way that we can kind of, I guess, really see what's important or what those boundaries should be is when we have time for reflection through meditation or through other states of consciousness where we kind of lose a sense of time or lose a sense of our boundaries. And that's, I mean, that's kind of ironic, you know, because on the one hand we're saying we need boundaries, on the other hand we're going outwards. But again, it goes back to that issue of, you know, we've got our boundaries in this world, but then when we go to the center, or when we expand beyond those boundaries, we go into a divine consciousness. And it's almost like we need to really know our boundaries really well in this world, understand the world and what the boundaries of the world are, in order to transcend them. Because we need to know what we're up against. We need to realize what the boundaries are so that we don't get stuck in them, so that we can then learn the rules of going beyond. And as I said at the beginning of this session, I really think that what we are here to learn is to see the limitation of this reality for what it is, and then to kind of transcend it and to go beyond it, and to not be bound by the tyranny of Kronos. But first we need to really see it for what it is. In order for us to flourish in this world, we need to understand the boundaries. We need to understand what's important to us in our soul expression, to then set those boundaries. And to set those boundaries, one of the best ways of doing that is through ritual, is through the creation of sacred space, so that we can feel safe in the transcendent space that we want to create, and that we can then sort of really allow ourselves to let go and expand beyond, so that we bring this expanded knowledge and wisdom back into this world of the ego and this time-based world, so that we can grow. And I think that's a very powerful lesson, you know, sort of around the ego. And this is something that I always say. It's, you know, we're not here in this world to destroy or transcend ego. We're actually here to teach the ego new behaviors. You know, the ego, when it comes in and when it's conditioned in the beginning of life, learns certain behaviors in order to survive. As we become more conscious, as we learn the techniques to go beyond the ego, we can then show the ego that different ways, different behaviors are safe. Different relationships with the world, with ourselves, are safe. Then really survive and flourish in a much better way than it would have if it kind of stayed limited and unexpanded. It's the unexpanded ego that kind of stews in its own juices, stagnates and kind of kills itself. It's the ego that through, you know, spiritual practice, the mystery initiations, kind of dies to the ego in a symbolic way, kind of has these hugely expansive experiences, brings that information back, brings those deeper understandings back, so that death is no longer the biggest fear of the ego, because generally speaking, death is the biggest fear of the body and therefore the ego. So as we retrain the ego that death isn't this terrible thing, that in fact death might be a liberation, we can then also start to grow exponentially with each one of these epiphanies, these experiences of expanded consciousness, so that we can become more divine in our embodied experience in this universe of, or in this reality of limitation. And again, that takes us back to that imagery of Fanes, which is the unconditional love, which holds the egg or the beingness together, as opposed to the snake of time, which breaks that egg. So we kind of, in this process of, you know, expanded consciousness, of reconnecting to our heart, to love, we put that egg of eternal beingness back together. And it's kind of when we're in that space of wholeness that we can confront death better. And, you know, very possibly, in order to learn how to die, paradoxically speaking, we need the time to relearn the parameters of the life that we were born into. So again, you know, paradoxes usually are quite divine. Paradoxes usually have a very strong lesson in them. So we're in this time-bound reality to learn about the limits of time, and therefore to strive for the transcendence beyond time. We're in this life to learn the lessons of life in order to transcend those lessons, so that we can, with an open heart and with peace, embrace our death and our eternal life that is beyond the experience of this very limited physical body. But again, that said, what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a little practice of meditation, of connecting in to our body, but creating a safe space for the body, so that the body can kind of get out of the way, the emotions can get out of the way, the head can get out of the way, so that we can expand and go beyond. So at this stage, I'm going to ask you to either light a candle, or to get a smudging stick, or to get some incense, in some way to create a space for yourself to create sort of a smoke or fire that defines the meditation space that we're creating, so that we can then use that to transcend. So I'm going to use like a smudging sort of bowl here that's filled with sage and Palo Santo. It's the same principle for everyone. You can just get a candle and move it up and down your body, as I will. Otherwise, your incense or your sage. But I'm going to explain that in a moment. So I'm just going to first of all let this burn a little bit and create some smoke. So in the meantime, while you wait, you can just get your things ready, close your eyes, just go inward, start by feeling your body, just feeling how your body feels now. And now you're going to get your candle or your sage and just pass it first of all up and down your central axis, up and down the center of your body in the front. Now pass it up and down your arms with the intention that the smoke, this incense, this flame is just releasing energy that's held. And now do it on the other arm. It's just releasing energy held in the physical body, but it's also putting in new light, putting in new consciousness into your aura, which of course affects your physical body. So now you might want to go around the edges of your aura, sort of define the aura, sort of around the sides first of all, and then front to back, and go far back as you can, maybe along the sides, and just get a sense of creating a membrane of an aura, a protective container for that body of light that is your aura. And now just hold that smoke or that candle to your heart. Just for a moment, see this as the very center of your being, the center of your light. Let that smoke, let the warmth of that candle register in your body. Let the scents register through smell. And as you hold that center, also just now visualize that that center holds a space of light for your aura. This aura which is your light body, and you can now put down your candle or incense, perhaps in front of you, in a safe place. And just feel very embodied, feel very present here with your body, with yourself. You might even just want to imagine now that flame of the candle or a flame in your heart center. And that flame in your heart center radiates light, filling up the aura. And as you become aware of your aura, which is like a bubble of light, which is like that egg of Eros, which is unconditional love, this aura is held together by love. It's a magnetic field. It's all the different parts of you are held together in this space, magnetized towards the center of your heart. So this holds your body together, it holds your emotions together. And if there are any ways in which you're aware that you leak this energy, that you don't love yourself, that you reproach yourself, or fail yourself in some way, just be aware of some of those behaviors and just come back to the love. If you get distracted, come back to the love. And as you sit in this centered space, centered in your heart, as you become aware even more of your aura, maybe just get a sense of the membrane of your aura, which is like the weave of a basket, a weave of light. Maybe you get a sense that there are different places that might have some holes or leaks or cracks in the membrane. So light and energy are leaking out of different parts of you. So from this space of higher love that you hold in your heart, just send the energy now to repair any of those holes or cracks. And you might see and visualize the hole in the crack, or you might feel it as an energy leak somewhere in your body. Just get an intuitive sense of where it is, and now, with the power of your intention and consciousness, just fix that weave so that it contains the light and the love within you. So that weave becomes consistent, tight enough to hold the space, to hold the energy, but at the same time able to breathe and allow in, soak in new higher frequency light from the outside. It can breathe, which means it can also just let in, let out some of the lower energy toxins that might be in your body and being, can be let out of the weave of that membrane. And as this membrane holds a higher frequency of light, as those holes have been repaired, just feel how your aura, the light of your aura, intensifies. Get a sense of what you hold within your aura becomes clearer. You feel more present and empowered. You feel the essence of you, which all comes back to your heart, centered in your heart, feeling love for yourself, for your body, love for your life and the experiences you have, the experiences that you cultivate and create. Feel love for them, even if they're challenging, even if they lead you down the wrong path sometimes. Feel love and acceptance for you, for your past, for this present moment above all. It's in this present moment that you choose your way forward. Perhaps you get a sense now of some important things that you need to cultivate in your life, create more time for, set better boundaries. Maybe it's around your relationships and your emotions. Maybe it's around money and space. Maybe it's around your time, the projects that you do and cultivate. Remember, you don't need to be triggered by other people. You can hold your center. You don't need to be pulled off your center by fear or doubt or threats. Your center is your place for you, for the true you of your soul passion to emerge even more. So perhaps you just get a sense of this true you, a sense of what else you love, what else in your life you love. What do you love so much that you want to make more time and space for it? And again, get a sense of the boundaries that you'd like to create to protect and expand these things that you love, these things that are important for you. How can you honor yourself more by making more time for these important aspects? And now, just give thanks to your soul, which is very much more present with you. Thanks to your body and this space, especially this healthy space that you've helped create ritually, this feeling of being present and strong. This is who you are. Know it, accept it, cherish it. Very good. And now just take a long, deep breath. Clear in yourself what you could do or need to do. Opening your eyes and being back. Good. So that's kind of the end of our session for today with Kronos.